But tonight I am honored to welcome Jordan Scott and Sydney Smith, the author and illustrator team behind the award-winning picture book, I Talk Like a River, as a kickoff event for the National Stuttering Awareness Week. Joining them in conversation tonight, we have another author-illustrator duo, local author Diana Farid and illustrator Billy Renkl, creators of When You Breathe. To give you a slight background for each of them, Jordan Scott is a poet and recipient of the 2018 Latner Writers Trust Poetry Prize for his contributions to Canadian poetry. I Talk Like a River, which released last September from Neil Porter Books, is Scott's first book for children. He lives on Vancouver Island with his wife and 2 sons. Sydney Smith has illustrated a few books you might know: Sidewalk Flowers, Small in the City, and Town is by the Sea, which won the 2018 Kate Greenaway Medal. He's received 4 successive New York Times Best Illustrated Children's Book of the Year citations. Diana Farid is a physician and professor at Stanford University, a filmmaker, and a published poet. When You Breathe, which also released last September from Cameron and Company Kids, is her debut picture book. She lives in the Bay Area. And Billy Renkl is a fine artist who works in collage and mixed media to exquisite effect. He lives in Tennessee and teaches art at Austin PA State University. When You Breathe is his debut picture book. So without further ado, I thought we might start with a little read aloud since these are picture books. So hopefully Jordan will read a bit of I Talk Like a River.
Yes, I will. Thanks a lot, Summer, and thanks for having me, everyone. I'm going to read a few pages from our book, I Talk Like a River. I wake up each morning with the sounds of words all around me. The P for the pine tree outside my bedroom window. K for the crow and its branches. For the moon fading in the morning sky. I wake up each morning with the sounds of words all around me, and I can't say them all. Well, thanks a lot, as I said, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with Diana and Billy. Nice to meet you, and thank you for sharing your beautiful book with us. Diana, one of my first experiences as a child wanting to be a poet was this American poet's essay on the breath line, which is a unit of measurement in poetry. Charles Olson was his name, and he was talking about structuring your poetry based on how you breathe. And for him, it was the typewriter was that inspiration because of its connection to the body and breath. And when I first read that essay, I thought, the way I breathe is so different, and that really got me thinking about my own body, my speech, the way that I breathe. And your book was so incredible, because it brought me back to that space where you are concentrating on your breath and and how that interacts with the world around you. And I'd love it every time I read a book that really I guess impacts me. I always try to hear it in the author's voice, and I'd love it if you could maybe just read a section of that book for us.
Jordan, thank you so much. I would be truly honored to. I'm so excited to be here with you. And Sydney, thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this. I have to compose myself because what you said just really hit me so deeply. Thank you so much for those kind words. This is When You Breathe, and I'll just share a little bit of it with you. Illustrated by Billy Renkl. Tree leaves sway when it flows by. Birds need it to flutter and fly. It carries your favorite song, stirs with stardust, the grand atoms of the universe. Outside, it's air until you breathe in, inhale, and then inside, air becomes breath. Thank you so much for letting me share a little bit of that with you. One of the things that was truly just such a delight to see in a little bit of the back and forth we had as we were thinking about what to discuss today were some of the descriptions that you brought up about how our books are linked. And one of the things that you said really struck me, and if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about it. You mentioned that you feel perhaps that your body was unconsciously reacting to the words, and you said this. You said you came into your breath almost despite yourself, and I was really struck by that. I think I know what it might mean, but I would love to hear what you meant by that. And I was wondering if you would be able to share that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did. Thanks a lot, and for that reading as well. That was beautiful. I think that I think what I was trying to say is that there's something that is there's something that is being talked about in both of our work that is otherwise neglected, and I think the connection would be the breath and speech and fluency overall. I think what's so interesting about your work is it makes you concentrate on something that's so natural, but not always something that we sit with and that we learn about. And that's the same kind of reaction that I find people have to, I talk like a river and stuttering in general. When something is, when speech disfluencies are brought up, it kind of brings larger conversation on what it means to speak, what it means to communicate, in the same way that your book brings up that the same type of discussion, what it means to breathe.
That's such a beautiful description, because I think in both it really does come down to what creates these connections between us, and the air, the sounds, the things that we may or may not be conscious about. And I felt that way very deeply with the river metaphor that you used. And I want to make sure we don't miss any conversation as well between Billy and Sydney. Perhaps it might be a good time to get in a little bit to the art, the gorgeous, gorgeous art of I Talk Like a River. It's just absolutely stunning. And I know Billy has some things he wanted to ask you, Sydney, and I cannot wait to hear the answers.
Well, I first want to thank you both for the chance to be here. I bought your book. Someone maybe somewhere I saw online the cover, and like that was enough. It is like that cover is so beautiful that I just ordered it right away, and it the whole thing, the text and the way the images sort of pace through it, it really is the most beautiful book of the last 10 years as far as I'm concerned. So this is pretty thrilling to like be like talking to you, like I feel like a kid. Speaking of kids, a thing that I find so moving about this book is the incredible generosity with which you both treat the boy. I don't know, Jordan, if you think of that boy as being you or being tangent to you, but either way, both in the images and in the words, there is, like, you treat that boy with such sort of solemn tenderness, and it's really beautiful to see. And I wanted to ask you both, really, but especially Sydney, to talk about how I think I read in an interview with you, Sydney, that that you want to meet the readers, children on the page, as humans, that you don't want to talk down to them, but as people who share a human experience. And it seems like the sort of the beautiful sort of grave tenderness comes from that respect that you obviously have for kids. And I wish you could talk about that a little bit and what you were trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot of generous. Thank you for all of that. That's very makes me incredibly uncomfortable. I guess the approach to illustrations and writing, I guess I've done a little bit of that too, and thinking about the character as and speaking to the child reader and the adult reader as well, with the commonality of the human experience, I think is the main goal for me, that I've always sort of try to accomplish that, because otherwise I personally, I just kind of get I go down these sort of distractions and these roads that lead me to generalizations and sort of like that idea of like, well, I'm writing for kids, what do kids like? Or I'm writing for a certain type of kid, what, that always leads me to a sort of dangerous territory of so the best thing you can do, I always found, that if you could just sort of boil it down and say, well, I'm going to just talk about what's common between everyone from ages, from our early age to the end of days, sort of like we all experience a love for one another, or wanting to feel safe, or wanting to take care of the people that we love. Like those are things that we experience throughout our entire lives. If you can speak to that, then I think you're good. You'll never trip up or find yourself speaking to a child that doesn't exist.
Jordan, you like obviously are intimately connected to the boy. Yeah, I mean, you're in his head. But I was surprised at how much you seemed connected to the boy, Sydney. Did you have a model? Did you have a model to work from?
No, actually, I don't think. I was going to ask you the same thing about your book too, and maybe you can answer after I answer. But I think I've been using the same child, and as I've been illustrating books, the characters become a little bit more and more kind of sort of like non-specific. I mean, with Small in the City, my other book that I worked on, it was very non-specific, where you couldn't even tell if it was a boy or a girl, or quite often there's not many facial features or anything. So I try to keep it as I try to keep the characters kind of almost like a what's the word? Just kind of like a placeholder for the reader as much as I can. And I think my approach to the character in this book, for Jordan's words, it's me, but it's not me, obviously, because I've never experienced that. But there is a way for me to relate to that, and I feel like that's the best way to approach it. Is like, how can anyone reading this book relate to that experience? So through the illustrations, you want to avoid certain kind of I don't know. Jordan, you mentioned it before that like there are certain ways that you've found that you've seen stuttering illuminated or illustrated in certain ways that you found kind of just you're tired of seeing it, right?
Yes, yeah. I think that what always strikes me is that you think you're talking about something very, very specific to you and your body, but particularly in the case with stuttering, it becomes about these kinds of larger discussions, right? Of fluency, disfluency, listening, right. I guess empathy, proprioception, these types of things, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think because I couldn't speak to the physical experience of stuttering, the best and only way that I could approach it was trying to get into just sort of like try to be inside the character as much as I could. So you and throughout the book, there's a lot of close-ups. I mean, especially before the gatefold that that happens midway or near the end. You really, yeah, like there you go. You're really much, you are in the head of the character, or you're right in their face. And it's a lot of portraits, and it's a lot of just sort of different approaches to trying to describe the feeling without it being literal. So you've got scratching into the paint, and you've got actual kind of like pigment falling apart on the page, like this is one of my favorites of the book. Only because it's kind of a risky illustration. You know, you do it and you're not sure how it's going to kind of go over. There's no faces, everything's kind of falling apart, and it's sort of it's not a pretty picture, but it describes the feeling better than anything else that I could do. And so that was the only sort of angle that I could really go at it, was just sort of like that. How can I try to render that feeling, you know, that feeling of being in front of a group of people and not knowing, you know, not being able to say what you want to say. Or I've felt that. I feel it all the time. Could be right now. I don't know.
Sydney, I recognize what you're saying in some of the images, like the one that you just held up, which is so incredibly powerful. But mostly, the reason I asked if there was a model is because I feel like your view is really one of affection for the boy, like not being the boy. And a thing I like so much about this book is that the voice of the illustrator is really different than the voice of the boy. I feel like the illustrations are the voice of someone who loves the boy. And you know, like illustration gives something else, you know, at its best, it gives something else besides just sort of a thin representation of the text. And that's my sense. Jordan, like the words are obviously the boy, you know, are coming from inside the boy. And there's a sort of a melancholy to it. I did want to ask you, because I know that you're a poet. This is your first picture book, right? And you've had your life as a poet. How has stuttering, like, how did that inflect your relationship to language as a poet?
Oh, incredibly so. This was also something I was going to ask Diana too, as a doctor, how that impacts poetry as well, because I think for me it is the intimacy with a language that really allowed me to become so attentive to words, even on the level of like circumlocution, which is that fancy term for finding another word for something. My particular stutter, and as a side note, I hear this in Biden quite a lot, is getting stuck on a word and then going through the Rolodex to find another one. And oftentimes that's a way to get around the stutter. So over the years, for me, it's just like it's an intimate relationship with language, but also a matter of survival in a way, to try to hide the stutter. But then it really grew into this love of words, really. And that's what, yeah, and that's what kind of brought me in at the beginning to poetry. And Diana, did you have this a similar type of experience? Because you're spending, I would imagine, so much time. When I read when I did all the research for my first book of poetry, which was only about stuttering, I just read medical glossaries like for years. There's so many gorgeous words in there, and I just wonder, like, how does that work? How does it become part of your poetic work?
That's such a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. It's this may not answer your question directly, but I think it's a really fun thing that comes up for me when I speak with kids. You brought up this idea of the words and this potential eloquence to the words that are medical, and also seem, I think, so much foreign, and probably create a lot of separation and distance between this sort of medical field and then the people that get taken care of, which is all of us. But there is this love of words that comes about for me. And one example of that, one really specific example of that, is this word alveoli. For me, it sounds like a song. And it's basically this bubble-like projection. There are hundreds of millions of them at the very end of our breathing tubes. And they're literally the place where air enters our body and oxygen enters our body, and where air exchange happens. And in my school visits, I'll have the kids sort of not sing, but say that word with me, alveoli, alveoli. And there is this incredible beauty in it for me. And I think it comes in part from what the word sounds like. And it also comes from the meaning of what it signifies, but I think also for me, what it has come to mean in terms of, I almost think of it as a kind of extraterrestrial space in a way that's within us that we're so unaware of. And I'm mystified by it. And I think it's so awesome to think of us as a place that also carries this depth and these interesting things. So I think from the standpoint of medical terminology, I think there is a sort of multi-level way to think about them. And one is sort of the song-like quality, and then the other is the meaning. When I wrote the first draft to When You Breathe, it was full of the medical terminology because I was really so excited about trying to have kids I think kids should be able to say all these words and know what their structures are. And it didn't necessarily work, but it was something that was inside of me and something that I was attuned to and I really enjoyed. So I think there is a poetry to some of that. But beyond that, I think that the poetry and the medicine connects in a very different way, because I was actually having this conversation with another author about how it's very easy to think of some of these medical things as technical or sterile or gross. And I think that I think they're beautiful. So I think there's an opportunity for sort of a culture change about the beauty of our structures, however they function, and however they breathe or put out sound or communicate, sort of a celebration of that. So, and I think poetry can do that. I think poetry can connect us in ways that just the individual medical terms may not, but if we connect them with things that maybe we're familiar with in our world, then it can maybe do that more.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
thank you for asking.
Of course, and I think that, Billy, that picture on page 11, that gorgeous painting of the lungs with the constellation in it, and that is just, I mean, for me, I don't know. I wish I saw that as a child. I think that would have changed a lot of things for me. That's stunning. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
you really knocked it out of the park. Is this true that this is your first picture book?
It is. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. But you have a long history of art making and teaching and illustration.
I do. And I don't see those, like art and illustration, as like, I don't see any division between those two things at all.
Sure.
But I haven't worked with a picture book before.
And what was how did you find it? Like, was it something that did you have feel like you struggled with it at all, or did it kind of come naturally to you?
You know what, the pace of it was, all of my illustration has been editorial before now, and the pace is so fast. You know, I would, if I have a question, I'd email the art director and I hear back in an hour and
Right.
and carry on. And this, you know, because it's going to print the next morning or whatever.
Right.
And this was spread over a year, and the kind of glacial pacing of it was disorienting for me. But otherwise, you know, I just like working with ideas, and I don't really care whose ideas they are. If they're my ideas or Diana's, I like that doesn't really matter to me.
Uh-huh. And you worked with closely with poetry before, is that true?
I took poetry in college and in graduate school. I'm not a poet, but I'm really interested in poetry, and like a way to learn about something is to try to do it, however badly. But I have lent my work to be the covers of a bunch of poetry books, you know, just because I want to support the endeavor. I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, because you mentioned E. Cummings and other, even Thoreau, who's not necessarily a poet, but like as a major influence, right?
Yeah, my work almost always starts with language, somebody else's language, Rilke, or yeah, just all of it. William Carlos Williams is who came to mind immediately when I was looking at your illustrations, the way you like lend such sort of beautiful nobility to the like a dinosaur on a windowsill, or you know, that dinosaur might as well be glazed with rainwater, you know, beside the chickens. As far as I'm concerned, it's you know, it's so beautiful. A thing I wanted to ask Jordan about, an idea that you just introduced that I'd never thought of before, would be to like even as a child, that you were aware of your body related to breathing and speaking. And I was not at all. I wasn't aware of it until I watched my youngest son play soccer, and he was just like so like fundamentally in his body when he was playing. Like I was a kind of a peculiar kid, and I spent all my time alone in my head, and I didn't have any thoughts about that at all. But it was that like you just introduced something interesting for me to think about. I am aware of breathing and how it relates to my body, but I had not before now thought about language and how it relates to my body. You said, Jordan, in that postscript, you mentioned that people see stuttering as unnatural, and like I feel like this book is maybe an antidote to that. I mean, it's obviously not unnatural because people do it naturally. I mean, if we think of it as unnatural, it's just because we have a narrow idea of like the breadth of human behavior. And it's just like one of them, you know, on a spectrum. Do you want to like, could you address that about how you know, but by burying the talk of stuttering in the natural world and references to pine trees and moonlight, like you suggest, there's nothing unnatural about it, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's definitely one, if the not most important thing I took away from my dad telling me that all those years ago. And then the older I got, and the more I researched and thought about disfluency, it turns out that, you know, fluency is actually the fiction that, as you said, you know, like we don't, nobody actually talks like that. And so I think that that's important for me to do or to talk about within my work, right, is to be able for people to recognize their own disfluencies, and and then I think that the connection to the natural world, just as which you've done in your book, that seems to be the next piece for me. When there's a real sense of solidarity with like movements around you. Right.
I'm pretty slow. I'm not a fast learner, and so when I was given Jordan's text, I was immediately drawn to it and engaged. But it wasn't until that the moment that Jordan and I actually first met, which was around the time of like developing the sketches and getting started on the project. We got together in Toronto and had a long coffee together back when coffee shops were open and stuff.
Back when people did that.
When people did that, yeah. And it was probably the most helpful thing for the whole project, because I had some ideas and I had like different kind of illustration devices that I was thinking about, and I thought I knew really what it was about, or at least that I had got the gist of it. But when it was that moment, and I remember that exact moment of us sitting across from each other, and I just was like, oh, he's not broken. Like, this is what it's about. He's not broken. And I was like, oh my God, I almost cried. I was like, this is it. That's it. That's the story, and there's such catharsis in this story. And then that moment of by the river. And I knew that moment had to be really, really powerful. So when time came and we had to work on that moment, that we're speaking with Jordan and also speaking with Neil, our editor, Neil Porter, we kind of decided that we had to have this kind of physical moment of this release of like cleansing, this cleansing feeling of wading into the water, into the very thing that represents this fluency and but how it's just I can get carried away by that. It's my own book.
That's really apparent in the illustrations, Sydney, that a book like this, it could tilt toward being mostly about reassuring a child with a stutter that it's okay to have a stutter, it seems like. But what the illustrations in the language does that, but what the illustrations do is like remind the rest of us of that also. And actually, like obviously you need to do, I don't know, 20 more of these, the two of you, and address like all of those issues that make children or people feel, sort of outside the community that they're not. And, and that's a long list of things that could be addressed.
It was a very rewarding experience. Pretty much 100% positive. It's pretty rare that you can have because it's a whole year of working with people. Sometimes, there's some back and forth, and sometimes it goes smoothly and sometimes not. But it was really rewarding working with Jordan and working with Neil, who's an exceptional legend of a guy.
Jordan, what poets do you read?
All kinds of poets. That's a hard list. Just put me on this. So definitely Carlos Williams for sure. Charles Olson that I mentioned before. those are the ones that I spent a lot of time with when I was a kid. But now just really like my friends, my contemporaries in Canada and the United States. Yeah.
I when I was reading the book and thinking about you being a poet, like your language use doesn't have anything to do with Gerard Manley Hopkins, but that was my experience reading Gerard Manley Hopkins, is that I stumbled when I was like that. You have to work so hard to say those lines. You know, I caught this morning's minion kingdom. Like it's like that I would think you know, you would have a way in to think about Hopkins if you had a different experience of language than I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
I'm going to jump in here because we're getting a little bit close to end. Not to stop the conversation at all, but almost to continue it. So we have just ended National Poetry Month, which is April, which is such a great conversation or connection between the poetry of both of your books. But also I would love to know a little bit more about National Stuttering Awareness Week, which I hate to say that I knew nothing about. I've just learned, my mind has just been blown with this one book, just the language that I'm learning and how I'm viewing everything. So I'm sure that there's a lot more that I can learn as well. Jordan, can you fill us in a little bit more about the week and what we can look forward to?
Well, I mean, I have to say, before I wrote this book, I had never talked to someone who stuttered before. And I was not aware of any stuttering awareness day or week or month. But since writing the book, and I've been doing, like, tomorrow I'll be talking with the National Stuttering Association, and I've been working with other groups and reading for kids and who stutter, and reading their poetry and talking about it. So it's quite beautiful to for me to experience that at this time in my life, where I think I'm much more open to it, and I'm willing to experience that with them. So I think for me, it's mostly about a week just to educate people about what stuttering is and what stuttering is not. And I think that's an important gesture.
One of the words that I've learned is disfluency, and just thinking about that and embracing that word has changed how I look at language in so many ways. So thank you for that. I would love to know also, how does it affect you knowing that we have a president who, you know, embraces his speech and shares his experience growing up with a stutter?
I think it's, you know, I think it's wonderful. I think that it's important for people to see that. I mean, if I think if I was able to talk to the president, I would ask him to actually stutter more. I can see how he stops himself, and I know he works very hard to get his pacing and his breath right. But I also really admire the way that he's open about it. And I think that that's helped a lot of people understand stuttering more, particularly on the level of intelligence, because oftentimes people who stutter are seen as not being smart because of that rupture, because often they will pretend to forget something or to misspeak. And those are always ways for that, what I like to call the regime of fluency to pounce, right? So I think that's I think it's he provides a really important a symbol of what stuttering and disfluency can actually be.
And not only the president, but our inaugural poet as well, Amanda Gorman, has been very open in how she has sort of hurdled her challenges. And part of that has been movement. So not only breath, but how she has integrated her body into helping with her fluency when she's reading her poems. I've been so engaged reading about her too. It's been wonderful. Also fluency and language. And I keep thinking how interesting it is, not only that how many different kinds of language there are. So there's medical language and there are quote unquote foreign languages, right? And how fluency can mean so many different things in how we communicate with one another. And these two books together, I think, just brought that to the forefront of how I'm thinking about fluency and communication with people in different environments, which I think is so important for all of us, but particularly with children, so many of whom are even pre-verbal. I just think that these books work so well for that audience. So thank you.
I have a question for Jordan and Diana. Is that okay? During the questions. I don't know if this is Sydney's experience, but I find language like completely inadequate to what I want to say, but I'm not a language person. Like it always seems stupid and clumsy. Do the two of you, does language do what you want it to do?
I guess I'm going first because Jordan has not unmuted. That is such a great question. You know, it's so interesting that you bring that up because I so badly want to draw or paint or photograph what is in my head when I write. It's so interesting that you bring that up. And what I find if I'm trying to write something that's really visual, I feel like I'm really struggling, and I have to let go of that censor and sort of put it all out before I can edit it to become what I want it to be. And even then, I often have to be surprised and sort of just really keep thinking about it. I mean, there's this joke that I'll often tell my husband, where like so much of my writing is me just sitting, staring out the window, like trying to figure out what it needs to be. So I don't think that they always feel adequate, but I enjoy the inquiry and I enjoy the surprise that comes when I try. And I think I enjoy the kind of song that it creates, because for me, that's also kind of a movement that helps me connect with the words and with the potential eventual reader. So that would be my answer to the question. You're on, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I always see, I've always seen language as a failure anyway. So for me, I never thought about, it's a great question, but it's something that I've never considered, because I've just always assumed it wasn't it wasn't adequate, and that's what I was working with.
It's interesting. I think that Billy, you, as an artist, you should feel like words, that words aren't enough. I don't know. My experience, I've only recently started writing, and so I'm a little bit late to the game, and maybe not as well versed with writing. But I something that I'm really starting to enjoy, and what Jordan's helping me a little bit with this as well, is I realize that words aren't the path to the visual. It's not always just like what kind of visual will the words lead me to, but the words themselves have this power and are a medium in themselves. And it's such a beautiful and mysterious art form that I am not familiar with. I'm really excited about, but I have a lot to learn about that because I am such a visual person. And I'm sure I don't know, Billy, how do you feel? Because you seem like you're so connected to words and poetry and writing as well.
Words never seem to say what I want them to say. But I've spent the last 40 minutes thinking about Jordan talking about like a strategy that a stutterer uses is to substitute another word. Like I had not heard that before. And I'm thinking of you like always mentally thumbing through a thesaurus and like that would give you such a different experience of language than just going to the same old words I always use, that are not inventive or, that are clumsy and generic. And like, that's really beautiful to think about.
It's sort of instant creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Immediate, yeah. So we have a guest who would love to know, we'll ask both authors, but we'll start with Jordan. What did you feel when you first saw Sydney's illustrations? Or was there a moment where there was a big reveal? And then we'll go to Diana too. How did you feel when you saw Billy's?
Yeah, I mean, talking about how language is inadequate, that's basically how I felt. That's my segue. I mean, what can you say? I mean, I actually had a moment today when I was looking behind Sydney at the illustrations, and I had a moment today when all of us were talking where I said to myself, this just feels surreal. It still feels very surreal. I think when somebody takes your words and not only makes every page into its own painting, but as I've said to Sydney before, the way that he understands disfluency and the way that he shows that in the book, I feel like nobody's ever understood me in that way. What can you say? That's a real gift.
And we found out we have the same birthday, just today.
Yes.
Which
Yeah,
we just had our birthday just on Saturday.
Oh my
didn't
gosh,
know.
happy birthday. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo what Jordan just said. I'm really not exaggerating when I say that I have not had the pleasure of seeing Sydney's work in person. But I have had the pleasure of seeing Billy's work in person. And it was December 12th, 2019. The he had packed up his original artwork to have it scanned, and it happened to be at the publisher when I happened to go there for an event. And it was an absolute honor to see this fine art. It's truly fine art, what I saw. And I started weeping. I'm about to start weeping now. Not only the sensation of somebody creating out of nothing this immense beauty related to the words that you put on paper, but making it way more than you ever could have imagined. And the paint and the collage work and the level of detail. I mean, just on the cover itself, the trees. I mean, in real life, each of these strokes, each of these rivers of paint, streams of paint are just exquisite. And, you know, he has stories about how he used flowers from antique postcards that have love notes and birthday wishes on them as part of the artwork. I mean, it's truly, there's hidden art even within the visual art. So the short and long answer is it was an absolute joy, and it was breathtaking in every way, and breath-giving in every way to see that work.
Thank you, Diane.
I want to know more about that process. I don't know if we have enough time for it, but maybe we could set up another Zoom and I could just talk to you about your process, because
Well,
it's the amount of work that it looks like that went into this is unreal. It's really it's super impressive, and it blows my mind. I don't even know how you'd even start to do that. So maybe I just need to take one of your courses.
There's no chance of that I would let you take one of my classes. So,
well, we do have one final question that actually is specifically for Sydney, but I think that Billy will be able to answer this, and it might give you a little bit more insight. So it says, Sydney, I'm a longtime fan and wonder how you challenge yourself to visualize more abstract elements of life, like speech, and how do you do that thing where you capture the light so darn well? So I would pose that first to Sydney, and then Billy also, because you're definitely capturing something invisible, right? Whether it's air or breath, and that abstraction, how do you make it something more substantial?
Right. Well, I think I always go to the details first. I think I always, especially lately, I feel like I've been always just sort of drawn to the details of life, everything that sort of surrounds the human experience, rather than just trying to describe it. It's a bit much, but the poetry, not that I'm a poet, I guess, but the poetry is really within the details that surround all of the experience of it. And so I think you can find that those kind of details can describe the abstract experiences of life a little bit more than trying to approach it head on. And then the whole light thing, I don't know why I'm more and more just sort of drawn towards the experience of light. I don't know how it doesn't work a lot of the time, and I only sort of share the moments that it does work. But I'm lately been really sort of fixated on the experience of memory, and how much that is so connected with light for some reason. I can't really. Also, I get a lot of inspiration from things outside of picture books, and art in other places like cinema or photography, and that's just all the study of light. And there's a language there within those mediums, and it's beautiful, and they are so easily shifted over to illustration and narrative art.
Your work does feel really cinematic. The like close up just on the eyes, or the close up on the toys on the windowsill when something else is happening, in a voiceover. So I can certainly see that. And I can also see like a sense of memory, like when I think about my own memory, I don't remember necessarily like big things. I remember these kind of inconsequential moments.
Right.
And the image that I love the most in the book is that the first time the little boy is putting his pants on, sort of in the dark. And
Right.
like, that's a completely unimportant thing, but it's, it's the sort of thing I remember about my own children's childhood, not their graduation, but, like just this glimpse of them inside themselves and unaware of me, doing an ordinary thing. And
Right. And also kind of vulnerable too. I mean, like,
yeah,
it's and reading something that you would do every morning, kind of, it's an action that's so repetitive, and you don't normally see someone. Actually, when I present books, I have got a couple of books of kids in underwear. I don't know why, but I think it's just sort of like a very vulnerable and honest portrayal of people in their underwear. I don't know why, but it's funny just to present that in front of kids, because they're always like, "Ooh," they don't know what to say when they see that in books. But
that's the work that made me think of Bonnard and Vuillard, those interiors,
Oh,
like
yeah.
late 19th century French interiors, where the figures like aren't paying attention to the painter or the viewer. Like they're so comfortable, like they trust the painter or the viewer enough not to pose, not to even be conscious. And
Right.
I
That's
think
really
that
good.
some of the, like you do that, Jordan, in the writing also, like you give us access to the boy who is unself-conscious when he's talking to himself about the experience. Like he trusts us and that's what, it makes reading the book so beautiful, on both.
Right. I kind of feel like it's almost like he's not talking. It's just sort of like he's talking to himself, which is an element of storytelling I really love. Is this sort of the voice of the character, and the relationship that you have as a reader with the words and with their voice, and who they're talking to, and whether you as a reader are involved, whether you're invited to be part of it. And I guess I still have a lot more to kind of discover about this book and Jordan's writing.
Yeah, it's like a privilege to have access to the boy's voice. Unself-conscious voice.
And those are the best picture books that do give you something new each time you go back and you read it, and you see something different, and you have a different take on it.
All right. And I've probably read this book like 4-5 times, so
Every night. You guys, this has been such a gift. Thank you for sharing your time. Quickly, I would love to know if there's anything else that we can expect from any of you in the near or far future. How about if we go Billy, Jordan, Diana, and Sydney? You can just tell us if you've got something we can look forward to.
I'm working up a proposal for a collage picture alphabet book. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but that's on my drawing board right now.
That sounds great. I have 2 more books coming out with Holiday House and the Neil Porter books, and one of them is with the man in this box.
that doesn't work on my screen.
So yeah, I very much look forward to that.
Yes, I have a novel in verse coming out spring of 22 titled Wave, and I'm working on some more picture books too.
So I'm working with Jordan on another book, and I'm currently sort of trenches with another book with Neil Porter as well, which is a author illustrator job, which is, I find, really, really challenging. I don't know. I mean, the first time I did it, I feel like I kind of lucked out a little bit, and it happened relatively painlessly. Although my wife reminds me how much torture I was in throughout the entire process.
You don't forget,
But
you don't remember the pain after it's
I
all over
don't.
and
I
done with.
just I remember being done, and that was great. How great it
Yeah.
was to be done. But she reminded me that I thought it was garbage the entire time, and so this current pile of garbage that I'm working on is going to be great. It's going to be great.
It will be. We
It will
can't wait
be.
to
It
see
will
it.
be. I have a lot of faith in it, and it's just you know, it's an adventure, but I'm excited about, you know, the future, especially working with Jordan again.
We cannot wait. I'm really, really excited. Thank you all again so much. I want to remind everyone that if you order the books from I believe there's links in the chat. But remember, you'll get signed copies if you order them through us. And then over the next week, you get a 15% discount. If you guys enjoyed this evening, tomorrow we have another great event. The author and illustrator of the picture book biography, Sarah and the Big Wave, will be in conversation with the story's namesake, Sarah Gerhardt, who's the first woman to surf Mavericks. So that sounds amazingly cool. So I might tune in for that.
That's awesome.
Thank you, all of our attendees, for watching and listening to this amazingness presented before us. Thank you all for participating and sharing your greatness and your two amazing books. I'm honored to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Billy and Diana. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Billy. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Summer. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.